Friends of psychopaths/sociopaths, how did you realize your friend wasn't normal? Story 1. He was very open with it. That guy was genuinely helpful. What he seemed to fear the most was to regress into a helpless person who couldn't fit into society, like the psychopaths that go in and out of jail. So he made it a habit or a challenge to help at least one person with something every day with no strings attached, friends or strangers, as practice, to hold himself accountable. It was a bit weird, and he was kind of weird too, but he was open about it in advance, so he'd have a harder time screwing us over if he ever had a relapse in willpower. It was definitely a bit of an ego thing, I think. He liked the role of being a nice, friendly person who overcame his shortcomings. I hope he really did. I know his motivation was a bit unusual, but I've never met someone as helpful as that guy. He wasn't afraid of anything. He'd do dangerous stuff like remove wasp nests from his neighbor's porch as casually as he'd help an old lady carry her groceries to her car. Cool dude with some crazy stories. Story 2. When I, age 21 in 1989, walked into the hallway of our shared house and saw him playing the electric piano. He had a photo of the girl he'd been dating in front of him and was, badly, playing mournful-sounding music. Bad breakup? I asked, and he explained to me in careful detail how she accused him of being a feelingless monster because he was unmoved by some minor tragedy. I've forgotten exactly what. He proceeded to tell me she was right. He didn't care and couldn't make himself. He didn't take joy in the other person's suffering, he just wasn't moved. So the piano and photo were an attempt to fit in with the rest of you. See, if I'm doing this, I'm acting like a person with feelings and people will like me better. I did the 1989 version of Weird Flex But Okay, and he evidently decided that meant I was cool with his lack of feelings. And he'd come to me every week or so with some situation coming up in his life and ask me how I thought a person with feelings would react. He eventually got pretty good with this. He called it putting on the human mask. People he met after this generally accepted him as a functioning human. We've been friends ever since. He's very successful as a financial manager of some kind because emotion doesn't enter into his decisions. He's married, has a couple of cute kids who he sees as mostly gibbering animals, but sometimes they think. His wife seems happy, but he rescued her from a really toxic situation, so she might just figure she's better off. And to the best of my knowledge, she doesn't know that his humanity is a mask. He still talks to me every time her birthday or their anniversary or Christmas comes near and runs gift suggestions by me. He's totally intelligent enough to see that the stock and cliche gifts are the wrong choice, but also doesn't have the perspective to be able to put himself in his wife's shoes and see what she'd want. I'm pretty good at it, judging from the reactions she has to his gifts. Edit in response to many comments. He's not autistic, or at least not meaningfully so. He's what we would have called a psychopath before the DSM-5 changes came out. He's had multiple therapists agree with this. He was raised in a stable and loving home. He followed his parents' advice about what the rules for life were, even though he never understood why people were supposed to behave that way, other than to avoid consequences. He loves being in business because you can be as predatory as you like without consequences so long as you stay legal. His primary motivation is to have status and wealth, which he's got plenty of both. Collecting tokens makes him a winner. Having a seemingly loving relationship with his wife and kids gains him status. If he treated them badly, others would talk. He says that, were he born in caveman times, he'd be the guy who stayed up alone at night and guarded the camp while everyone else slept. Story 3. My dad loves kids and describes babies as very engaging pets. He's a bit of a robot, probably on the spectrum but undiagnosed, but he's excellent with children, because he can point out to you the actual data on child cognitive development and always approaches kids at that level. Most people don't realize that a child's ability to produce language lags by years behind the child's ability to understand it. The first detectable signs that a child is picking up human speech is at 6 weeks. By 6 months, a child actually has a lot of ability to comprehend language. They're just not capable of producing it because that's really hard. So, Dad will speak very simply to babies, but he'll speak to them, and they generally adore him. He's also great at getting them to behave because he tells them the rule but will also explain it. And you can watch their little baby minds go, oh, okay, that makes sense. I very much continued his methods with my own kids, who have gone on to be just as freaky sometimes, but I'm okay with that. You take a 6-month-old baby to get their shots. You explain, they're going to stick a needle in you. It's going to hurt, but they're nice, I promise. The needle will stop you getting sick. And the nurse gives the kid the shot, and the baby just smiles at her instead of screaming, and she's creeped out. But if you tell the kid it won't hurt, you lied. The kid not only has the pain, they have the betrayal. As far as I know, my dad never lied to me, and I won't lie to my kids. Story 4. She let me read a written complaint from someone who claimed to have been bullied by her. It was very detailed, too detailed to be made up, but she denied all of it and played innocent. She showed it to me to gain my support against the accusations. A few months later, she started bullying me with the exact same methods described in the complaint. Story 5. There were a lot of red flags. He was definitely closeted bi, which is fine, but his behavior wasn't. The main red flag is that he had a slew of ruined relationships in his wake. He was a college theater professor and had a pattern of behavior in which he would identify young men in the department who were vulnerable, often who'd had recent girl trouble and or had no current male role model or father figure. Many of them had issues with their dads or their dads were deceased. He would then start spending time with them and love bombing them until they thought he was their friend. He fed on adoration. I don't even think he exploited all these guys just to bang them, though he probably did some. He just got off on people adoring him. When they started showing interest in other people, he'd go hard on the discard. There was a pattern of subtly putting these guys down and then building them up so they were conditioned to please him. If he got bored, he threw them aside. He once told me he viewed all his interactions with people through a caricature he created for them. For example, a black friend of ours was the loud black woman. Another friend who'd lost his dad recently and was suffering severe depression was Eeyore. He was incapable of self-reflection. If he knew he'd upset you, he apologized, but it was always empty. He just couldn't reflect on his actions and actually accept accountability for wrongdoing. He was also a budding alcoholic and would attend lectures and rehearsals drunk and then laugh about it later like it was some kind of inside joke. Of course, he was also a liar. The man was pushing 40 trying to convince these college-aged men he was in his late 20s so they'd hang out with him. He didn't care about your boundaries. At his house, he'd regularly expose himself as a joke and acted confused when I didn't find it funny. As one of these guys he love-bombed and emotionally manipulated, I eventually wised up and realized that my relationship with him was not healthy, and that it wasn't acceptable for him to have the emotional relationships he was having with his 19 to 20-year-old students. I cut ties and he went from love bombing to resentment so fast. Later on, my wife and I were visiting some friends who were also friends with him. They'd known him longer than we ever did, and let him stay in their guest room for months when he lost his living arrangements during COVID. They eventually kicked him out and cut ties too. Then they told us that they had recently run into a former high school classmate of his, who said, "I'm so glad you got away from him. There is something wrong with him. He's dangerous." Story 6. We were in high school. I finally called her out for manipulating and bullying people into being her friend, including me, after she had told the whole school I was pregnant. I wasn't, and as this was a very small, very religious school, it took a good amount of effort to dissolve those rumors. In retaliation, she accused my mother of slapping her when she came over to our house to apologize. For many reasons, this was absolutely false. My parents and I decided I would move schools the next semester to remove us from her. The first day of school, she came running up to me grinning, going on an excited tangent about how she had told her mother she wanted to switch schools too so she could be with me. It took me another 2 years and intervention from the school after my mother and I built up a good amount of evidence for her to finally be told if she didn't leave me alone, she would have consequences. We were going to go to the police accusing her for stalking and harassment. The threat was finally enough to get her mother to agree to have her leave me alone. Prior to that, she was insistent that we were best friends and her daughter never did anything wrong. Story 7. I'd always wondered about them. We were friends as teenagers because they were exciting to be around. They'd do anything, no matter how dangerous or embarrassing or stupid. As we got older, I noticed that they kept doing these things, often without care or consideration for others. They taunted me often, apparently just to see how I would react. Then, one day, their partner committed suicide and I tried to offer support. They weren't upset that their 10-year-old had found the body. Then they revealed that they told their partner to kill themselves just to see what would happen. Yeah, we're no longer friends. Story 8. I used to work for a sociopath. At first, he was incredibly nice. I honestly thought he was the best boss I ever had. He overpaid me, gave me lots of time off, and showered me with occasional gifts. There were many experiences along the way where his behavior was obviously questionable. At work, he had a habit of sending me into unsafe situations and not realizing that my well-being would be at risk. When an employee left for another job, he acted like they were pet goldfish that could be flushed down the toilet and replaced. I recall one occasion where I merely mentioned to him of an experience where a former coworker and I visited a local distillery to grab a drink after work. My boss went on a tirade about that employee being unreliable, and my boss repeated the notion that he knew he wasn't a long-term fit in the company. Keep in mind, my boss hired him. There were two final straws with my boss. The first occurred when he took me out for lunch one day and threw a temper tantrum at me in public. The second took place in a one-on-one meeting. He brought a knife and used it to intimidate me and force me to do what he wanted. Story 9. The love bomb withhold pattern is a huge clue. The narcissist will try to select an insecure and codependent person and shower their victim with praise and love and even gifts. Then, the victim gets hooked. Once the narcissist has the victim under their thumb, they stop love bombing. They withhold affection, which forces the victim to start doubting themselves. What did I do wrong? How do I win their love again? The victim will then start doing whatever they have to please the narcissist, to earn back their affection. Once they do, it's rinse and repeat until the narcissist gets bored and they throw the victim in the garbage in favor of a new toy. Pro tip, you shouldn't have to prove yourself worthy of your loved one's affection. Friends, family, and partners should just love you. It shouldn't be transactional. If you feel like you have to earn their love, that's a clue that a relationship isn't healthy. Story 10. I had a friend who always seemed a little off/low empathy, but I ignored a lot of the signs. She was a destructive party girl with a weirdly hostile relationship with her mom, as in she was regularly hostile to her, and I noticed she could be a bit of a bully and thought of people as below her. I was a pretty vulnerable teen who always struggled making friends, so I tried to brush that stuff off because she was cool with me. There was a point where she got super drunk, slept with my boyfriend, and they called me together to mock me about it. It was humiliating, like peak embarrassment. What's even more wild is the week after, she approached me as if nothing was wrong and it was all just a bit of fun. I knew she was a bad person when she called me, but I knew she had something deeply wrong with her when she had no self-awareness about the fact that an action like that would make me not want to be her friend. She seemed genuinely surprised that I was pushing her away. I've had some updates about her from mutual friends, and it sounds like this is a pattern she continues to repeat in her adult life as well. She really treats everyone in her life like a disposable amusement, and she's not smart enough to mask and manipulate them, so everything she does is just extremely blunt, and she doesn't seem to ever really care or register that it's hurtful. Losing friends also doesn't seem to bother her. She's never like, how dare you be mad at me? She just doesn't get why people are so sensitive. Story 11. We were friends with him and his sister. We later realized when we could only see anger in him and pretty much nothing else. That was the first flag. One of the friends started dating the sister, and he came to us one day and told us that our friend had taken him aside and told him that if his sister was hurt, he would have no problem hurting him in turn. Our friend was terrified because he truly believed him. That was our second red flag. The final one was when his family got T-boned at an intersection and his dad and sister were killed, mom in the hospital for observation, and him in there as well with some broken bones. He didn't seem to care at all when some buddies went to see him. The hospital was a teaching one with psychiatrists and all, and one came to see if he wanted help while he was there, and he basically asked why would I need help. Mom agreed to a formal evaluation, and he was confirmed psychopathic. His mom basically committed the rest of her life to make sure he could function in society, taught him what societal right and wrong was and laws governing behavior and stuff like that. Story 12. My uncle is a sociopath. That side of the family is messed up, so no one noticed for a long time that he wasn't normal. Took myself and my father, as outsiders, to finally realize he was completely incapable of real emotion. He just faked it, and faked it well. The final straw with us was when my father went to work for him. Took a good year before he realized my entire uncle's business was a scam and possibly outright fraud. This was pre-internet, so word of mouth got around really slow back then, and so much money was basically stolen. Think of a massive Ponzi scheme. He eventually delivered on his promise, but took 2 or 3 more suckers to get there. Eventually, regulators came down on him. He lost wife number 2, and it turned out all her money was tied to his business and her parents' money. All gone. We cut ties from him as well. Nothing was his fault. If you challenged him, he would turn on you so fast. He's on wife number 3 now, from what we see via Facebook and some family still in contact. He tries one get-rich scheme after another. His online life is full of complete lies. Wife number 3 is also successful, and he just leeches off of her. The frustrating part is if you, dear Reddit user, were to meet him in person, you would like him. You would believe his stories completely and ask us why we were so mean to him. Yep. This has happened before. Story 13. He yelled at me because my nephew didn't want to watch a movie with his kids. My nephew is 2, and he's scared of the dark. The kids were using a projector instead of a regular TV, so the room had to be dark. Every time the door would close, my nephew would freak out, so I decided to keep him with me. My friend started flipping out, screaming at me and threatening to spank one of his kids, who did nothing wrong. He started yelling at his wife also. He has 5 kids, mostly girls. The oldest girl tried giving him snacks to make him feel comfortable and offered to sit next to him, but my nephew was too afraid. It felt like she was trying to help him because the safety of her siblings depended on it. I didn't know what to do other than leave with my nephew so the girls wouldn't get in trouble. I tried calling social services, but there's no proof that the girls are being harmed, so they're still with him. I'm afraid for the girls and his wife. I think he's suffering a mental collapse because his mom died from cancer. His mother also abused him. He's become very harsh with the women in his life, including me. My husband doesn't want me back over there without him. I've been trying to convince their mother to take the kids and leave, but she won't listen. I'm only able to reach her through Facebook. She uses her daughter's school tablet to reach me. She can only contact me when he leaves the house. He takes all the phones when he leaves. She's not allowed to leave the house, have friends, or have company while she's away. He doesn't let his wife buy clothes or do her hair. She's always calling me to cry and complain about how he's treating her, but she won't do anything. I defend them all when I'm there, but I try not to, because he treats them worse after I leave. I feel helpless. I don't know what to do. If I was wealthy, I'd buy her a house and move them far away where he can no longer scare them. But I'm not. Story 14. I have an ex that there was something seriously wrong with. I know everyone says that about their ex, but this one was very different. Like, he wasn't at all malicious, but he had no regard for other people at all, whatsoever. And he was extremely charming and skilled at lying. Highly intelligent. I didn't realize the extent of it until a while after we broke up. I was extremely shocked when he drugged his grandmother so that he could steal her car. He never seems to do anything for the sake of hurting people alone. He doesn't seem to derive any satisfaction from causing harm. He's not like Ted Bundy or anything, but if that person is between him and whatever it is he wants, he has no problem with doing whatever he needs to eliminate the problem. He only ever surrounded himself with people who are useful. If they aren't useful, he has utterly no interest in them. Story 15. I wouldn't say friend, but we were in the same rehab program, so we knew each other. The only emotion I ever saw him show was anger, and boy, when he got angry, we knew to back off. He didn't bother to follow any of the rules or boundaries set by the counselors and group leaders. He didn't care if he said something offensive or hurtful. The biggest red flag, though, was when he said that he liked to kill animals. We were talking about coping skills or something, and he says that he likes killing animals when he gets mad. We kinda laughed at first, but then we realized he was serious. He then talked about all the animals he's killed and tells us that rabbits are his favorite, that he liked to watch them struggle. I guess he liked feeling powerful and in control. It's sad though, because I know he experienced some incredibly traumatic stuff as a kid, but I was still freaked out around him. Last I heard, his parents sent him to a psychiatric residential facility. He was under 18, but I'm not sure why. Story 16. They barely react to emotional stimuli. Everything they say and do is always backed up with brutal logic. They made an adult cry simply because he was getting annoyed with them in high school. They were charming without even trying, extremely smart. They taught a small friend group of theirs how to pickpocket. They stole a whole Nintendo Switch and a few phones. They weren't evil or anything like that, but they did admit that they were indeed a sociopath. They were quite kind, in fact. They'd give you gifts on birthdays. Most inappropriate one was a huge knife which he gave to a girl. They tried to give emotional advice, but it just comes off as adamant commands. Sometimes, though, they can be sweet, but I don't know if it's intentional or not. They once helped a friend who had trouble seeing by buying them custom-made spectacles which cost $200 and gave them for free. Once we asked him which gender he prefers, and he responded with women. They are generally smarter, considerate, more mature, and yet somehow less acknowledged. Then we asked about the type of women he likes, and he just responded with huggable and sweet. One thing he said that really struck me was, "Not everyone will understand me, but I will always understand them, and I accept their reasoning for it. Not everyone will be able to handle me because of how I decide to do things my way. Everyone in the world is unique, but there are only a few who are truly different and only conform by their own rules and ideals. Most only abide by the rules and ideals of others, which is kinda sad. They limit their own freedom by limiting their view and are less accepting to major changes or differences. It's really strange to see someone who's clearly above all else, and yet they choose to be on the same level as everyone." Story 17. My little sister, 27 years old, recently was diagnosed as a sociopath. Growing up, we always suspected that she couldn't comprehend empathy. For example, as a young child, she would get bothered by the sound of someone's breathing and attempt to stop them breathing so she could enjoy silence. The only thing that mattered to her was her own comfort and validation, and she didn't seem to understand anyone else wanted the same. She kept mostly silent her entire childhood and just observed and absorbed all human behaviors around her so she could mimic them. that resulted in her being able to manipulate everyone she came into contact with. She lived off my parents until she tried to burn the house down as a punishment for them offending her, because she equates a personal affront to burning them alive in their home. She currently is living off an asexual guy she's convinced to be her caretaker, because banging is an annoying distraction she doesn't want to be bothered with. I love her to death, but it's difficult dealing with her and all different versions of her that other people know. She's a chameleon, and it gets her what she wants, but I wonder how lonely it is to never have anyone truly know you.